Hi, everyone. Welcome to and thank you for coming to the first in a series of webinars for our knowledge-based lifecycle management tool called SimpliDATA. So why are we doing this now? Well, for many in the industry, Rondaxe has provided proprietary software for data management, cost of goods, and tech transfer solutions. But after this year's DCAT and the conversations that we've been a part of, we decided to put a webinar series together focusing on how our SimpliDATA platform can help with ongoing concerns expressed during the conference. So here's what stood out at DCAT this year. Development timelines are shrinking. Process development is being pushed earlier into clinical stages, leaving less room for inefficiencies. The second is speed is now a requirement, not an advantage. The tempo for process fit analysis has accelerated dramatically. And AI is a big topic. AI adoption is growing, but so are concerns. Open platform AI offers powerful capabilities, but raises real questions around IP ownership and data control. Right now, I'd like to introduce our CEO of Rondaxe, Ken Schultes. Ken will run you through the utility and functionality of the tool so you can grasp a better understanding of how it will help your business and benefit you in the long run. Ken?
Thanks, Dave. So what we want to talk about here today is the iceberg dilemma, which is what SimpliDATA was built to address. One of the issues that we always have when developing a process and transferring the information is there's, by necessity, one has to distill this information down into a package that can be transmitted to others. And then oftentimes groups that's just it. That's just all that gets transmitted and preserved, except in other messy reports. But that's not the full story, and the full story needs to be communicated to the entire team. We call this the iceberg dilemma. The rest of the story is under the water and doesn't get preserved, or it doesn't get communicated well, and it does not, or may not even have been developed properly. So a knowledge base was necessary to help address this issue. And that's what SimpliDATA is. So with that, let me show you SimpliDATA. So this is the app running in a Google browser right now, and you can run in any browser that's well supported. The example that we're going to talk about today is a synthesis of bedaquiline, which is a tuberculosis drug that is now generic. So here the page is organized in such a way. The middle part of this is these are all the process steps, and we'll get into the details of these. These are going to be recipes, and they're going to be generating all of this information will be collected over here on the left-hand side from very granular level. But over on this side is on the right side of the diagram are the project level information, and this is a big part of what kind of falls through the cracks sometimes when communicating information in a knowledge base. So the first part here is materials. So we collect all this material information, and there's quite a few materials in this operation. And of course, these are materials that are also available for other projects if they happen in global. What I'm going to do is focus on one particular material for this project, which is the kind of unusual resolving agent that was used in this example route that we analyzed. So you see this shows the information. We collect all this. If you enter the SMILES field, it will generate a diagram and also give you the molecular weight. It also collects, because we use this for other purposes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, we collect the material safety data and its environmental data as well. And you can see there's some impact from projected carbon dioxide emissions from the material, and the water usage in order to generate it. Those are all estimated. And so you can see there's some other things here. For example, oxygen balance. So this is a little bit under the -200 line, which means there's some potential that this could be an explosive, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. But you collect a lot of data about all of those, and that's important. Another thing that we look at is the impurities. Now, many of the starting materials and intermediates of a process can become impurities in the final product. So you'll see them here also, not just in the material section, but down here in the impurity section. But there's also reaction byproducts that have to be kept track of. And that's part of developing a process is, you need to control your materials. So we talk about where do they come from, how do we control them, what is their ultimate fate? And we classify their type so that we understand what kind of risk is presented to the patient by their potential presence, and some just basic chemical information. All of this can be used to help support a filing and also just to communicate to the entire team, what do we mean by this? We keep track of all the synonyms as during the course of a project. Impurities will generate many different names. This section here is kind of just a handy little thing, because it's too often a project will be delayed because we don't know exactly where the reference standards are. This sadly happens quite a bit. And so we have a convenient place for one to keep track of that and communicate it to the entire team. Where are they? What is their current status? Here's the methods section. This is very handy also. You keep track of all the methods for the process, particularly the in-process controls, but also all the things to help support the transfer of the analytical package as well. I'm just going to tap into this one so you can look a little bit. And of course, we spell it really well too. But you see its status. We don't have give a lot of information about it. It wasn't actually used in the project, by the way. And its status is qualified. But if we want to learn more about it, we can go to a citation, because this is another thing, is that you can make contextual links to documents in a document manager, or even or actually upload the document itself. Oops. Let's put the whole flag across there. And then we can go to monographs. Okay, now there's more information that are required beyond just what's in the material section, especially for an API. You're going to want to have the physical chemical properties. These are often collected and presented in an NDA. So you have a convenient place to put all that information. You can also put in the specification if that's helpful, put all that information right there. But probably more useful is that this is a place to put the supporting documents for the product, that like the safety data sheet, for example, or you can also have the REACH evaluation and the customs evaluation and the shipping instructions and the storage instructions. All kinds of things can be placed here, and it's a convenient place to hang them where people can find them. So now I've touched upon this a couple of times. So the citations can be placed here, and you can see in these examples we have both links to a document manager, and also you can upload directly to the same database and in the Azure cloud that we use for assembling the knowledge base. All of that information will just be right there and available to the entire team. It may come from your computer. There's a lot of reasons why one might not want to clutter the document manager with some of these documents that are still useful to the production and development team. So this gives you a convenient place to put them so everybody can find them at need. I'm not going to touch on this much. We may have a future webinar on this subject, but we also look at what are the properties of real equipment trains and apply them to the recipes that we're going to be generating. And so this is the right-hand side. So now let's talk about how we generate the more granular information. So I'm going to open up a process. And what is a process? It's basically a recipe. So it's a step-by-step example of operations that are used to make the particular target here. So we start with this limiting reagent. We make this material here at about a 71% yield. So it computes all of this stuff for you. Just to show you, okay, here's the process flow diagram. So you can kind of see what's going on here. This is automatically generated, by the way, from the recipe. So you can see we're charging the materials first, and then we're performing a reaction by heating it up. And we check to see that it's done or not. And if it is done, we proceed to the isolation. If it is not done, then we reheat and hold. Or alternatively, there can be a set of instructions for a contingent operation, but that's not the case for this one. So let's go back and see how we build a recipe. So just by way of example, I'm going to add a new material here. So I'm going to insert a row above, and I'm going to perform an action. I'm going to charge material. And in this case, I'm going to charge epichlorohydrin. And how much of it am I going to charge? I'm going to charge, I can use either physical units here, or I can use relative units. So in this case, I'm going to charge one equivalent of it, one equivalent relative to the limiting reagent. And where am I going to put it? I'm going to put it into this reactor here. And I can parameterize this as well. I'm going to charge it at a tenth of a liter per minute. And I'm going to control the temperature to be less than 15 degrees. No more than. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the default text and making it more English-like by adding by modifying it. So you can do that. So I'm going to save this real quickly. And now I'm just going to go back to that process flow diagram again and show you, hey, look at that. Now you can modify the process flow diagram instantly. You just modify the recipe and the diagrams change also. So what else is going on in that thing? Well, we added a bunch of parameters to that operation. And that's important because these are things that fall through the cracks all the time. It's like, okay, well, what was the temperature? That was the limit here, 15 degrees. What was the rate? Tenth of a liter per minute. We updated this parameter table immediately upon correcting the recipe. So what else do we have over here on the left-hand side besides the recipe? Well, we have a bill of materials. This is all the material that's charged each step. Epichlorohydrin's here now. The equipment capacity, what's the volume in the reactor? Well, we increased the volume at step 4. So all of a sudden we have more stuff in there. We're keeping track of the volume at each step along the way. A Gantt chart, this is simple because it's a very simple process. You can see how the equipment is being used in this thing and what the rough timeline is. This is the consolidated bill of materials. These are all materials that are used in the operation. We've already looked at parameters. There's some holes in this process, which are interesting. So we know that there's and this is another thing that falls through the cracks a lot. You really do need to evaluate this, the hold information when you're talking in your quality risk assessments. You really need to look at that. Here are the tests, just the one test we know of. We dispose of the materials, we know that, and then we touch upon a scorecard really quickly. So you see there's some things we have to keep track of, the safety of the materials that are present, and such things as that. So we're collecting all this information together in one place so that we can do more things with the information, with the knowledge base. So now I just want to step back out and point. Now we have assembled the knowledge base. And so what are we going to do with it? So now that you've got this, what are you going to do? Well, there's a lot of things you can do with it. You can generate reports. Another thing you can do with it is you can assemble a score. So here, of course, the process you saw is not the only process in a sequence to make betaquilin. Is actually it's a convergent synthesis of many steps. We'll just show you one root example here. Okay, so here's the root. So there is a convergent synthesis is brought together at this step, which is a doozy, by the way. And all the way to the end, you can see it's not a particularly efficient step. It's only a 30% yield at that stage. And so we proceed to the end with the rest of it, purifying the resolved salt, breaking that salt, and then making the desired salt, the fumarate. So one of the things we do, one question that often comes up is how well developed is this process? So we've developed a system of scoring where we look at, okay, what are all the requirements of this process? So a perfect process would have a score of 10 along each of these vectors: control, sustainability, safety, operations. But about the only process I can ever think of that would score a perfect 10 would be one that's done in water with a single step at 100% yield and has no byproducts. So since that is not very very common, we now have to consider, okay, well, what is it that has to be done in order to execute this operation? So, we need to have extreme conditions. We need to be, in this case, we have to have very cold temperatures. So it's like, well, that should be a demerit. You can't be a perfect 10 and have to work at super cryogenic conditions. That requires special process equipment also. And we if you have toxic materials, that should be a demerit from a safety standpoint, or energetic materials. You can't have that either. And if we have a lot of impurities coming into the operation, a lot of byproducts, that should be a gig as well. And then even worse, if you're controlling the impurities that are severe, that would be a severe risk to the patient. For example, a carcinogen, that's a gig. You shouldn't allow that to happen. You really should be controlling those by the process itself and not letting it happen. Stoichiometric efficiency effects is kind of an unusual demerit because it affects both the sustainability of the process, because you need to have efficient conversion, but it also affects control because a poor efficiency process will generate a lot of byproducts. So that should be another gig. So stoichiometric efficiency is something going to be talking about as we expound our score here. So, well, let's look at the score for this route. I'm going to pull up the scorecard here. Okay, so as you saw before, we collect information about each of the process steps. So we just kind of collect them together for the entire route. So we brought them all together here and collected together all the demerits, and we see, well, this one has quite a few demerits, and a score that is only a kind of an acceptable would be, well, that's maybe not fair, is a 5, and we're getting a score here about 6.38. So really not that terrible, actually. Safety summary, of course, we have other things going on. Well, that's not so good. We're down here to 2.6, so that's not the best. And so on. There's parameter summary, bring all that together. Impurity summary. Now, this is something that we didn't touch upon a little bit, but you can see there is an M7 class 2 operation in this one. The rest of them are class 5s. Really no nitrosamine, so that's good. And then here we have the PMI summary. This is something that was very much looked at, and this is kind of ugly because this is not a very efficient process and from a conversion standpoint. So it's going to generate a lot of waste, and you can see that. Here's the stoichiometric efficiency. Now let me talk about that for a minute. So when we're trying to evaluate how good a chemistry is, there's a lot of scores on what the atom efficiency is. It's kind of what this is, kind of not. But this is like how many moles of intermediate and starting materials and key starting materials do we have to handle in order to make 1 mole of our desired compound? And in this case, we need to handle 126 moles of all of these different things to make 1 mole of beta-equivalent fumarate. That's a lot. And most of it, as you can see, is this bromoaniline, because this step is nasty. It has a very low yield. If it weren't for that, and probably even the next step, this would be really a pretty efficient process. But sadly, it is not. And so it suffers and has a lower score because the stoichiometric efficiency is poor. Let's just skip ahead to the end and look at the scoring. So we collect all those together and we see what the vectors are. So you see the operations, not bad. We talked about that already, about 6. Safety, not great. Control, efficient control, of course, that's related to the stoichiometric efficiency that we saw, not the best. That also impacts, this is really sustainability. We use the term efficiency sometimes. It really isn't that terrible because it doesn't use a lot of nasty materials. Most of the materials are actually quite safe and, are not impactful to the environment. So as a result, it's not all that terrible. Surprisingly, I was really kind of amazed by that. So the yield is only 5.8%, which we already talked about. The E factor is 1260, nasty. You make 3 tons of CO2, emit 3 tons of CO2 to make one 1 kilo of product, which is wow. And so from a lot of standpoints, this is not a great process. However, you're comparing it against other real processes. This is a big improvement over its alternatives. So that's the point I want to drive home, is that it's it really is relative, and it really does kind of drive, okay, what can we do to make this a better process? So I would spend some time looking at making these yields better. That would improve the control. The safety is going to be tough because you have this exothermic reaction you have to deal with. Maybe something can be done to make that more safe, but that would be a route of investigation. So with that, let me come back to our diagram. So to sum up, you see what we're doing here. We're looking at all these all these vectors of performance and how they are affected by what we have to do in order to make the process operate. And so it will have an impact, and perhaps there's things we could do to improve it. You can see what the avenues for improvement are. So um, what we have demonstrated is the assembly of a knowledge base. We bring together all of these kinds of information, and often information that is not well presented or preserved, and we provide contextual links to key documents so that the team can find things, which is always a huge problem. So we've tried to address that. And the recipes where you have the really granular information are semi-automatically constructed. That it allows you to do this quickly without spending a lot of time. And you can bring all kinds of pieces of information together that often get missed, but in an efficient fashion. And then we looked at an application of this knowledge base. Is that one of the really interesting ones is to you look along these 4 different vectors of performance and how one might make a better process. Um, and in conclusion, what we've shown in this demo is that timelines are shrinking, process development is being pushed into earlier stages, and you don't have as much time to deal with things. So you have to go more quickly, but to go more quickly, you need to have your knowledge base more well established so that you're not repeating work. You can find data, you can know where you are. So this helps improve your speed. And AI adoption is growing. And one of the things, and so are the concerns. So one of the problems that we foresee inhibiting the further use of AI is that you're providing information outside of your company, and you're letting the world know what's going on in your operation and the way you're thinking about looking at it. Here we have the possibility of looking at the AI within the knowledge base. We can contain it. It can be here. You can preserve your data, and you can preserve the intellectual property that you have developed in analyzing information. You're not sharing that with the rest of the world. So we're thinking about this as AI within a fence. We're developing tools for this right now that should make this very easy for users to apply their knowledge base that we have helped you develop. So with that, thank you for visiting today and seeing our webinar.
Well, thank you, Ken, and thanks to all for coming. As mentioned, this is the first in a series of webinars. Future webinars will probably dive deeper into the tool and show individual sections that'll greatly benefit you and be of useful to you, and you'll find value in each of these individual sections that we're going to show. Also, we've recorded this webinar, and we'll be distributing that not only to everybody who was a part of this webinar, but people who were not able to attend. So be on the lookout for that. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you all soon.